Hello everyone, how are you? I hope you are fine and you are enjoying your life. Viewers, today I'm going to share with you the third lecture on the history of English literature. I had already shared two lectures before this. The first one was about Anglo-Saxon and the second one was about Anglo-Normans. Viewers, today's lecture is very important from the history's point of view. Today we are going to discuss the age of Geoffrey Chaucer, the Chaucer who is considered as the father of modern English. The Chaucer who was born in the reigns of Edward III and lived through the ages of Richard II, and he was died when the Henry IV has extended to the throne. Geoffrey Chaucer was born in 1340 in London, and his age, the life there he spent, that was the age of transition, the suspension of emotion was there. So a lot of changes were taking place during the age of Geoffrey Chaucer, and that is reflected in his literary works as well, and we will be discussing those works in detail. But let's discuss about the social background of the age of Chaucer. We know that the literature is the reflection of society. Whatever is present in the society, that is reflected in literary works. So if you look at the age of Chaucer, we see that there was a Black Death where the 1/3 of the population of England died there. Then it was followed by the plague, again the famine, then the 100-year wars with France. We know that the France and England, they were not having the good relations. So that 100-year war, again, that has badly affected England. So all these things are reflected in the works of Geoffrey Chaucer. In fact, Geoffrey Chaucer himself had participated in that 100-year war, and history tells us that he was captured there and later on he was ransomed and brought back to the England. Geoffrey Chaucer has also remained the parliamentarian, and he was also trusted with diplomatic missions. The most of the time he was going to different countries, and the history tells that he had also gone to Italy for diplomatic mission, and there when he went there he was inspired by the works of Petrarch and Boccaccio. That works, their literature really inspired him, and when he returned back he started working on it, and this is the reason that Chaucer is called as the morning star of the Renaissance. That Renaissance, or that element of Renaissance that was brought from Italy, and then he applied it on his own literary works. The political situation during the age of Geoffrey Chaucer was also not as stable. We see that there was the conflict between the king and the subject, the unwise rule of Edward III that has badly affected the lives of people. So people were not happy. They were suffering from the unwise rule of the king. So everything, the people were suppressed and they were not happy. And beside this, socially speaking, the corruption of the church, the control of the church over everything, and some movement also started in the reaction of all these unwise and unhealthy rules. So let's give the brief introduction of those movements. In such a scenario of affairs, the social movement was started by Wat Taylor. Then the religious movement was started by Wycliffe, and he is considered as the morning star of the Reformation. So what he did, he translated, the Wycliffe translated the Bible in English. So originally it was written in a Hebrew language, so he translated it in English, and that was not tolerated by the authority of the church, and they barely punished Wycliffe and his followers. And literary movement was started by Chaucer himself. So these were the major movements during the age of Geoffrey Chaucer: the social movement by Wat Taylor, the religious movement by Wycliffe, and literary movement by Geoffrey Chaucer himself. Geoffrey Chaucer is also considered as the first humorist in English literature. The element of humor was also there in his literary work. Though he is not a genuine humorist, but he is considered as the first humorist in English literature. We remember his famous line that some people are wise and some are otherwise. That otherwise has a lot of meaning, and we need to understand the other line that was very famous, that was taken from the wife of the Bath, Canterbury Tales, that she had 5 husbands at church door and many companions in youth, still she was a worthy woman. So he introduced the element of humor in his literary works. That was something new. If we talk about the language that Geoffrey Chaucer used in his works, that was the East Midland dialect. We know that that was the dialect of the king as well. So the bill was passed in the parliament in 1362, and the East Midland dialect was declared as the standard dialect of England. So Geoffrey Chaucer used that dialect, and this question is asked repeatedly, that what dialect Geoffrey Chaucer has used in his literary works. So we must remember that the dialect that he has used is East Midland. And now if we look about the literary works of Geoffrey Chaucer, his works are divided into 3 different portions, starting from the French period, the first part, when he translated some works from French and English. The second portion is Italian portion, and the last is the English. So now let's discuss the literary works of Geoffrey Chaucer in detail. Viewers, let's now discuss the literary works of Geoffrey Chaucer. As I told you earlier that his works are divided into 3 different periods, so let's discuss the works during his first period, that is a French period. So the first notable work during this period is Romaunt of the Rose. This is a translation of the Roman de la Rose in octosyllabus couplets, as this French poem is the most famous allegorical romance of the Middle Ages, and references to it are so common in English literature also. The second most famous book during this period is the Book of the Duchess, that was written in 1369. It is an allegory written on the death of the Blanche. So during this period, these are the 2 major works of Geoffrey Chaucer. The second literary period of Geoffrey Chaucer, that is Italian period. And during this period, we can see the clear influence of Petrarch and Boccaccio on the literary works of Geoffrey Chaucer. So during this period, if we look at the works of Geoffrey Chaucer, the first famous is The House of the Fame, and second is Duchess and the Crazy, and the third Legend of Good Woman. If you go through these works, you will find the clear influence of Petrarch and Boccaccio in his works. The third period of Geoffrey Chaucer, the English period. During this period, the Geoffrey Chaucer became an independent. The first 2 periods, you can say that he was learning and he was translating the works of French, the works of Italian. Then in the third period, that is English period, he completely became an independent writer. And the most important work of Geoffrey Chaucer was written during this period, that is the Canterbury Tales. Now this is a very famous and important work of Geoffrey Chaucer's. If you go through this, you will see that 31 pilgrims representing the all classes of society. In this work, the different classes, almost all classes, are discussed. The Geoffrey Chaucer actually wanted to complete 124 tales, but he could not complete those all because he died. We can see that some are the longest poem, like the longest tale, like the tale of the night, and some are the shortest, like that of the cook. So there can be the different questions, MCQs from this portion. For example, what is the longest tale of Canterbury Tales, or what was the original plan, or how many tales Geoffrey Chaucer wanted to complete. So this work is full of different MCQs. We know that all these pilgrims they were going for the pilgrimage to the Saint Augustine. So this is very important, and everyone has advised that beside other works, this should be the major focus of the Geoffrey Chaucer's work. Viewers, these were the major literary works of Geoffrey Chaucer that he has contributed in the field of English, and that is why, because of his contribution, because of his major contribution, he is considered as the father of modern English, and he is also considered as the father of modern poetry. So in this lecture, I have tried to discuss about the Geoffrey Chaucer only and his literary works. And next video, that is in continuation of this video, I will be discussing about the contemporary writers of Geoffrey Chaucer, that who were the other major writers of his age, and I will be discussing their literary works as well. And I hope that this video will help you and it was beneficial for you, and I'm sure you enjoyed this. And thank you very much for watching this. And in the end, I request that if you have not subscribed to my channel, then do subscribe it and wait for the next lecture that will be in continuation of this lecture. Till then, Allah Hafiz.